Hey everybody, Happy New Year from everyone at Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to welcome you to the new format of Chef AJ Live as we enter our fourth season. Can you believe that I have been broadcasting live every single day, at least once a day, sometimes as much as 5 times a day since I started the show on March 20th, 2020. I had no idea it was going to be a show or that people would want to come on the show regularly, especially such esteemed guests as I have. I started going live just on YouTube when the pandemic began to create a sense of community and connection, and people liked it. So here I am, almost 1,300 episodes later. But I wanted to introduce you to the sponsor of the show. His name is Thomas Allen. We call him Tommy Balsamic because he's the CEO of my favorite balsamic vinegar, California Balsamic. And what you may not know is that he gives 2 free bottles in the flavor of their choice to every single first-time guest living in the United States. And he has done that for all 1,300 episodes. So I just want to take this opportunity to wish him a happy new year and to thank him. So Thomas, thank you so much for, real TV shows have a sponsor. You're like the real deal.
Well, Chef, I get people who call in and chat and say, I'm talking to a celebrity. I've seen you on Chef AJ's program for 4 years. And I said, oh my gosh, that is extraordinary that we have been doing this for this long. And well, to me, it's just wonderful. This couldn't be a better audience to have for people who enjoy our products as the plant-based community. So we love it.
Yeah, and I want to let people know that, over 100 people applied for the regular slots. There was only 28 because we had to go because February had 28 months. And you got one of the regular slots. And let me see, when are you on? I know you have you are on, do you remember what week we have you? Because you have a really fun show coming up. Is it?
Third week.
Okay, so you're on the third Tuesday of every month, and you're going to do it with our other friend, Nick DeVorn from Local Spicery. And your show is called, what is it called? It has such a quaint name. It's something like Vinegar and Spice and Everything
Vinegar
Nice.
And Spice and Everything Nice. You got it.
With Nick and Thomas, so you guys will have to tune in. How many bottles have been redeemed? Because it's so interesting to me that every time we have a new guest on the show, it's funny because I had a guest come on. It was her second time. She goes, "Where's my vinegar?" I'm like, you only get it the first time. People are really coming on the show for vinegar. And so every guest after the first time, they get a letter thanking them, asking them if they want a copy of the broadcast because I can't save it more than 2 weeks. How many of those, 1,300 shows, how many people redeemed it, would you estimate?
I say that we sent out to well over 500 of your guests, and we've done easily about, I'd say close to 1,100 bottles have gone out to all these people. And we absolutely hear back from some of them saying, oh, this is way better than I thought it was going to be. And with that, we just say, well, wonderful. If you like to get something, order whatever you want, and you'll always get your 2 free Chef AJ samples with every order.
Wasn't that nice? Remember that one doctor that wrote you a handwritten thank you note? Do you remember who it was?
I offhand, the note is still on the front door of our warehouse because it's so rare.
I want to say it was Dr. David Bowman. Does that ring a bell? Because
it could have been.
Let me know next time you're on because we want to acknowledge that. That's an art. That's a lost art form, writing handwritten thank you notes. So what I want to know is what are the most popular flavors that have been chosen by the over 800 guests of Chef AJ Live?
So we went back, we have a sheet of a yellow pad, and we write down every person, their address, and the 2 flavors they requested. And it's not surprising, Chef, they're mostly part of your favorite sampler. The 7-herb Italian, always our most popular flavor. The teriyaki with fresh garlic and ginger. The curry balsamic. The smoked hickory. And my favorite is the sweet heat. It makes the top 5. So those are the all-time best for the speakers.
When we have people like that are raw fooders, a lot of times we don't even offer it because they don't consume vinegar. But man, I would take it and just give it to somebody. What a great gift,
And we have people it's funny. We made a mistake to a nice young lady recently, and we sent her a wrong bottle. Of course, anytime we make a mistake, we will fix it. And so we let her keep the bottle that we sent her by accident. And she said, I already have the perfect person to give this to. So we have people regifting our products constantly.
Let me ask you, I love your product. You have over 30 SOS-free flavors, and we have an extraordinary chef on today. I'm going to ask him what he thinks about vinegar in general and cooking, because we know it's so healthful. But there's only one flavor I don't like, and that's lavender. Have any of the guests actually chosen that?
As far as I know, no one has ever asked for lavender, and I wouldn't be surprised because it's not a flavor that I personally would use, but people who like it absolutely love it. So
What do they use lavender vinegar for, though?
again, any vegetable or salad, just because they like the flavor of lavender. And of course, putting it in any glass of soda water to give it a really refreshing, lavender soda with no calories.
Oh, you know what? That's one. I'll see if I still have the bottle, because I might have given it away. I didn't think to try it that way, because I love putting a tablespoon in a club soda. Do you have any upcoming appearances? I recently saw you at the Harvest Festival in Sacramento. Are you going to be anywhere? Because if people could see you in person and taste the vinegar, they always buy.
And that's true. And that's why for 25 years, Ethel and I have been going to festivals and farmers markets and events where people can sample. The only event that we're going to do besides your event on January 15th in Sacramento will be in Fountain Hills, Arizona, the third weekend of February. That's the next event, because there's nowhere in the Bay Area that's doing events outdoors, because it's just the weather is too, crappy. And generally the Phoenix area, Fountain Hills is just outside of Phoenix, will be there the third weekend in February.
Well, there was no heat at the Harvest Festival, so we may as well have been out there. So
that was the most uncomfortable weekend ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And this was your idea. I didn't even ask you. You were the one that came forward and said, hey, I'd like to, offer these to your guests. So I'm sure they appreciate it. And I appreciate you so much. And are there any new flavors we can look forward to in 2023?
Oh my gosh, we've got two flavors we've been working on for the last couple of months. They are a fresh jalapeno and lime. We're using Nick's Persian lime spice and fresh jalapenos. And then the other one we're working on is the sun-dried tomato and basil flake one. And we're just tweaking the recipes, adding a little bit more, taking out a little bit of that based on what people have told us over the last couple of months. So those are the two flavors, probably February or March, that we'll be coming out with one each month.
Perfect. And time for both of our birthdays. Well, thank you again, and what you're doing for the SOS free community. And I look forward to seeing you the third Tuesday with the debut of your new show with Nick DeVoren, Vinegar and Spice and Everything Nice. And Happy New Year, Thomas, to you, Ethel, and everyone at California Balsamic.
Thank you, Chef. Look forward to seeing you in the real near future.
I'll see you in 2 weeks. And guys, we literally have 2 tickets left to the conference in 2 weeks in Sacramento, and the website will be closed off tomorrow. So it's your last day to buy them. All right, Thomas, take care. Bye-bye. Now I get to introduce a very special guest. I have known him for over 10 years. This is how I feel about him. I adore him. He's a great chef, to be honest. His name is Chef Del Sroufe, and the name of the show is Chef Del's Kitchen. He is the kickoff artist on this new format. Okay. And no, you gotta mute. Okay. And he's written many, many books. I believe I have all of them. And some of them were New York Times bestsellers, one for I think over 30 weeks. He wrote the China Study Quick and Easy Cookbook. He wrote the China Study Family Cookbook. I think this is the one, he'll let me know which one was the bestseller. This is the Forks Over Knives book. I don't know how anybody writes this many recipes. And then in his story, he used my writing partner, Glenn Merzer, for Better Than Vegan. I'm sure he's written many more. He is a talented chef. We had him once at our Healthy Taste, and he made the most delicious shepherd's pie. His food is fantastic. Everybody loves him. I'm proud to call him a friend, and please welcome him to the very first episode of season 4 of Chef AJ Live. You're in for a treat. He's going to be making, in honor of New Year's Day, a Hoppin John with greens and cornbread, and something that's very intriguing, a sauerkraut with jackfruit and apple. Please welcome. The hardest thing is to pronounce his last name, Chef Del Sroufe, rhymes with loaf. Hey, Del, how you doing?
Good, AJ. How are you doing? Good to be here. Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year. I'm so happy that you wanted your own show, because you have such a loyal and friendly following of people. And, even if they're not watching live, I'm always happy to give you a copy of the broadcast, and you can put it to your group so they can see you.
They are a wonderful group of people, and you're right, they're the friendliest people on the internet, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I love you got the 2 camera setup. You got to teach me how to do that. That's so cool. So just out of curiosity, are you a fan of vinegar in general?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it is one of those essential ingredients, not just for salads either. I mean, you see, especially since the realm of flavored vinegars has come out, vinegar is used for desserts. You know, it's used in so many ways. But the thing about flavored vinegars that I love is for the traveler, for somebody like me who gets on the road and maybe wants to go get a salad somewhere and there's not an oil-free or fat-free dressing in the house, or it's fat-free Italian, which I hope I never have to eat again. You can take your own vinegar, and that's all you need for a salad, right? A flavored vinegar, it makes all the difference. So I'm a huge fan, and I don't remember if I've had the California balsamic at your event or not.
You would have had to, and I can research this because every guest at least was offered 2 free bottles. But if you haven't, I'm sure Thomas would send you some samples because they've got some pretty cool flavors. And you're right, because with the flavors not being just fruit flavors anymore, like teriyaki, you can use them on grain bowls and poke bowls.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of options there, and I was thinking about that sun-dried tomato and basil is going to be pasta salad for sure.
Absolutely. Right? I'll make sure Thomas gets you a sample because it's really good quality vinegar. And people go, oh, there's a saying, condiment responsibly, but it's so flavorful. You don't need a whole lot to flavor a salad.
It doesn't take much. So, I mean, don't let the price of some of these fool you because you're just going to use a very little to flavor your food.
Absolutely.
It's all the difference.
Well, speaking of food, where did we get this tradition of making black-eyed peas on the first day of the year?
Well, there's a tradition that goes back into slave days and into the Old South. And there's a couple of rumors, by the way, about how, or maybe mythology, about how Hoppin for one got its name. One story is that there was this old man, an old former slave, that used to go around jumping up and down when the Hoppin' John was ready. And then there's another, or something like that. And then there's another, a little boy that would do the same every time the Hoppin' John came out. But it goes back to the ancient traditions of slave food and African foods of how Hoppin' John was good luck. And if you made it a certain way, so this traditionally it's sausage, is a good luck because it represents the coin. Greens represent money and all that. So it's a fun tradition, but I didn't know. In my family, we didn't talk about the traditions as much. We just did it. And I have a northern mom. My mom's from here in Columbus, Ohio, where I was born and raised, and my dad's from Kentucky. And so my dad's family had more of the southern traditions, and we had Hoppin' John every year, the cornbread, the Hoppin' John. My mom, with the northern tradition, did the pork and sauerkraut, right? So pork and sauerkraut was that at mom's house, and Hoppin' John was at dad's, and I sort of fused them all together in one big meal.
Well, why the name Hoppin' John, though? Do we know?
I don't know. I think because of the name of the guy that was literally his name was John, and he was hopping up and down for the dish. That's all I know.
That's funny.
I'll have to look it up and let you know if I hear differently.
That's fun. Well, I love the idea of jackfruit in a sauerkraut. That's amazing.
Well, I think your guests are probably used to the concept of jackfruit. If you're new to it, it really is. I'm relatively new to this, by the way. I'm kind of a slowpoke when it comes to adopting new foods. And this one's new for me in the past year or so. And I've really become a fan pretty quickly. Now, I had tried it a few years ago at a restaurant, and they did it in a taco. It was horribly spiced, right? So I assumed jackfruit. But then I did it on my own. I had an intern want to make a taco night at Wellness Forum Health when I was there for a Cinco de Mayo celebration. And he made it. And it was fabulous. And I've discovered a few secrets of things that I like to do with it to give it into a texture that makes it enjoyable for me. I didn't put this into the recipe, but one thing I can do, so if you look at it, you can see how it's it has that whole cubes taste, and I'll put it up under the thing there, you can see it better. But I like to mash it a little bit like this. And you can do this with your hand, or you can do this with a potato masher like I'm using here. And I just like the texture better once you do that. For some reason it gives it, once it's cooked, gives it a little bit more of a meaty taste. And if I'm making like taquitos or tacos with it, I might even do a quick pulse chop in the food processor to get the texture that I want. But you can see how smashing it gives you that stringy kind of pulled porkish flavor that is so popular in cooking. But to be honest, if you guys weren't here in the camera, I would do it by hand because it's just easier that way.
Don't you always wonder who was the first person to do something, like who was the first person to turn aquafaba into whipped cream, and who was the first person to put jackfruit into pulled pork?
If I could go back and get a degree all over again, I would be a food historian, because I think the history of how foods come into being is simply fantastic. I mean, who would think? Have you ever seen the whole jackfruit? You probably have.
Yes, it often in ethnic stores, you know.
Yeah, it's this big piece of fruit, and it's not easy to handle. It's not easy to manage to get from the raw whole jackfruit to this state. And one, you have to use young jackfruit if you're going to do a savory dish out of it, because it gets sweeter as it gets older. It has kind of a peachy mango flavor, but at this young state, you can get it and use it for things like your mock meat. And I love it. But whoever came up with the idea is genius, because this is a fruit. Right? There's no fat. There's no. It's a fruit. It's a high fiber, nutrient dense food. So yay for jackfruit, right? And you know me, I'm a tofu lover. It was always my sort of protein of choice, if you will. But I'm so happy to have something that I could sit and eat this all day and not have to worry about. Right? So I love this for that very reason. But I love to find out the origins of foods, where they came from, and all that. It's kind of fun stuff.
It's so interesting how the ripe jackfruit and the unripe taste totally different, because the yellow jackfruit that you see, like in the fruit section of stores, it tastes like juicy fruit gum. It's like one of the sweetest things, but the jackfruit you're using, it's not sweet at all.
Not sweet at all. And it's funny, I thought about getting a whole jackfruit and processing it myself. And I went on YouTube and looked at videos of how to do it. It's the messiest thing. You want to get a whole room and cover it in plastic first. It's so messy. There's this ooze that comes out of it. And I'm like, I'll just go ahead and buy it. But
it's actually like super glue. Did you know that? It's like super glue.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's this crazy thing, right? The thing is, when you buy jackfruit, you want to make sure there's a couple of ways to different buy. You can buy it dried, which is what I usually like to do, because the dried doesn't have salt added or anything like that. If you buy the can, which is what I ended up having to get for today, it's actually stored in a brine, so it has more sodium than some people might like. So look for the dried if you want to get that sodium free, okay? And then you just have to rehydrate it.
Yeah, the good idea.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So we're going to start with our jackfruit because I want to get it into the oven and make some magic happen. What I do, so here's one of the other things that I do differently to get jackfruit into a texture that I like, is I put a little dredge on it. So you're going to discover this dredge in my next cookbook. This is a mixture of almond meal and nutritional yeast and garlic, salt if you want to. When I'm using jackfruit out of the can that already has the salt in there, I don't add any more salt to this. But we're just going to coat this like this. We're just going to pour that over, and then we're just going to stir that up together. And then we're going to put that in the oven. Oh, I forgot to pull out a pan. Put that in the oven and bake it off a little bit. I like doing this in the air fryer because on the air fryer, it does it more quickly. But you've got to watch it, because this is mostly water and it cooks down to nothing pretty quickly. But at just the right stage, the texture is really nice. And I think you're going to like it. Now, let me pull out. I forgot to get a pan out for baking. I'm always forgetting. No matter how many years I've been doing cooking classes, and it's been 20 plus for me, there's always at least one thing that I forget to do. So today, that is putting out the pan for the jackfruit. But if that's the worst thing that happens in a cooking demo, I'm good. And by the way, if you see me looking over here, I normally have a camera person that's taking care of the camera and the lights and making sure that we're hooked up to Zoom and all that. I don't today because, it's the holiday. And so it's just me. So I had to set up, I have this studio, this app that I use that allows me to do this 2-camera setup. And so I have that set up, and then I have it hooked into my laptop, which is over here towards the right. And so I occasionally forget when I want to see Chef AJ's face, because I don't get to see her that often. I look over here at the camera or at the laptop and do that. So just throw this, and I probably should have lined this with silk pad or parchment lining, but we'll be okay. We're not going to cook the heck out of it. About 10 minutes on each side, then I'm going to set my alarm to make the magic happen. All right. So that's part one, and that's part one of our jackfruit. So my mom makes, when I was a meat eater, And I can see why, we talk about my issues with food. My mother was an expert at what we call hyper palatable foods. She made real food taste really good. And her roast pork was a delicious, amazing dish. But it's been a long time since I've had it. And so I've gotten to the place where this to me is just as exciting, but I love how this turns into this dish. Mom never did. We're doing jackfruit, which is taking the place of our roast pork. We're doing with sauerkraut. I've got this great sauerkraut. Now here in Ohio, we've got Cleveland sauerkraut. So this is a locally made raw fermented sauerkraut, and it's delicious. This is a caraway flavor. And then we're going to cook this all together. I put apples in with mine because I like how they balance out. I used to top it with sugar, and the sugar used to mellow out the tartness of the sauerkraut. This sauerkraut's not as bad as some of the traditional store-bought sauerkraut you buy. So this one's I can sit and eat this one raw and feel okay about it. But we're still going to put the apples in there because I think it makes a big difference, and it's kind of fun.
And Del, have you ever made your own sauerkraut?
No, and I was just looking at a content creator the other day doing it, and I think it has to happen. Fermented foods I've not done much of. I learned how to make tempeh years ago. I learned how to do some others, but I've never done it. So stay tuned. Have you done it?
I did it once. A friend taught me, and it's kind of labor intensive, I think.
I think that's the whole thing, is those fermented foods are labor intensive. So I always say, and you'll hear me tease about this, if the zombie apocalypse happens tomorrow, then I'll learn to make my own sauerkraut. But in the meantime, thank goodness for Cleveland sauerkraut. But don't buy the cheapest sauerkraut in the store if you can afford it, because it really is really uber tart. When you buy, and you can find a nicer one like this, the flavor is so much nicer. It's a little more mellow, and it's really got a great flavor. I'll put that label up there if you want to see it. So here in Ohio, we're lucky. Wherever you guys are, you'll find that too. All right, let's make cornbread. So AJ, you and I have a history together. I'm a baker, as you were. I owned a vegan bakery for years, and I miss baking every day. But I, as a person who's dealt with weight issues all my life, probably never should have started a bakery. Right? Well, and it's true. That's when when I gained 200 pounds, that was after I opened my bakery. Right. So I was living off the wrong foods at the time, and I miss baking. I would love to go and be a high-end pastry chef. I love some of the pastry arts that I see, but it's not good on the triggers for me to do. But having said that, I still do a little bit of baking, and cornbread's one of my favorites. What I'm going to add here is I do a mixture of pounds, 1.5 cups each of a whole wheat pastry flour and cornmeal. Here's the deal. If you can find it, look for whole wheat pastry flour. The difference between your whole wheat pastry flour and your bread flour is a hard winter wheat. It's a higher protein, and it's a coarser grind, right? The whole wheat pastry flour is lower in protein, and it's a softer wheat, so it has a more tender crumb when you bake it. I actually couldn't find whole wheat pastry flour today in time this week to do this. Another option is if you can find spelt flour, whole grain spelt flour works really, really well for this too. So whatever you can find. But if you end up using a whole wheat bread flour like I've got here, what you're going to want to watch out for is it absorbs more liquid than does your soft whole wheat pastry flour. So you may need to adjust the liquid or watch your cooking time. And that's another thing to talk about, because your oil-free whole grain baked goods take a little less time to bake than would your traditional baked goods with white flour and oil and sugar and all that. Something just to keep in mind, okay? So all we're going to add to this, it's a simple recipe. And by the way, I used to, when I had my bakery, that's baking powder, by the way. And this is a pinch of sea salt. If you're going to use it, you can leave it out if you don't like to use the salt. And then we're just going to mix that together. I used to, when I had my bakery, and I don't do it as much because I don't bake for me as much at home, because it's just such a trigger for unhealthy eating. If I cook the baked goods, I'll eat the baked goods. That's the story. So today's a special day, and I have a studio audience today of one person. And we're going to have lunch later, so I'll send some cornbread home with her, so it's not sitting here in the house for me. So you're just going to mix up your dry ingredients. That's your cornmeal, your whole wheat flour, your baking powder, your sea salt if you're using it. And then you're going to add in your liquids. So you've got plant milk. This is almond milk, unsweetened almond milk, by the way. And I make my own normally. I taught classes on it this past year, and it was very, very well received because once people saw how easy it is to make your own plant milks and how much less expensive it is and how much less packaging it uses, everybody was on board. So we got almond milk and then unsweetened applesauce. What the applesauce does in baked goods is it has a pectin in it that acts to tenderize the gluten and inhibits gluten development. And so you have a more tender crumb. It adds moisture as well. So always a little bit of applesauce. And by the way, if all you have at home, you don't have to go out and buy applesauce, because you buy the big jar of applesauce and you make cornbread once, and then the applesauce sits in there waiting for something to do. You can take an apple and core it and dice it and run it through the food processor and use that just as well as you could a regular apple. So it's an easy thing to do.
Do you have a favorite apple?
Well, I tend to buy for baking. I'm always buying the Granny Smith apples because the tart Granny Smith apple balances out the sugar or sweetener that you might use in your baked goods. So I tend to buy this more often than not. I also like Granny Smith because it tends to hold up better for baking than others. But you know, I might be lazy. When I go to my farmer's market in the summer, we have a wonderful local apple producer there, and I'm always like, surprise me, give me the best apple you've got this year. And I'm always surprised by something different. And there's so many out there, right? But Granny Smith you'll find in the house more often than not. Now remember, we're leaving out oil. So this is an oil-free cooking show. And AJ and everybody, you all pretty much know, oh, I forgot one more thing. You all pretty much know that oil is a no-go and you don't want it. I'm adding in a little bit of date paste. I have something else that I keep on hand for baking or for whatever, just for that sweetness. You know, the North and South have different histories with the sweetness in their cornbread. And I forget which is which, but I'm assuming since I'm a Northern boy, that would be like a little bit sweeter. I don't remember. But you know, you'll hear arguments with people about which one's good and which one's not. A little bit of date paste, where it used to be when I was making it traditionally, it was sugar. So the date paste does a wonderful job. And if you're still on the fence about sugar, and AJ knows this as well, the best thing you can do to get over the sugar is to stop eating the sugar. And then everything else like date paste and fresh fruit and all of that becomes sweeter on its own. So you don't miss the sugar. Don't overmix your cornbread, because remember, it without the oil in it, without the fat, without the sugar in it, you can make it tough and chewy quicker, right? And then you'll see that my lined pan doesn't look very pretty, but I took a piece of parchment paper and crumbled it up like that. And the reason is it fits into the pan better, right? I saw someone take and fold the parchment paper on the outside of the pan and then spit it neatly in there. I tried that and couldn't make it happen, but maybe I was going too fast. I don't know. So we're just going to put this as an 8 by 8 inch baking pan. And AJ, the recipes are where on the page there?
Okay, so Del, I put in everyone watching live, or actually I even watching in the replay. So we're limited to 5,000 characters. So I was only able to fit in 2 of the recipes. So I chose the Hoppin John and the sauerkraut.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, you can email me and I'll send you the others, anybody that wants them. How's that?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, so let me, and I'm always forgetting to the other thing I forgot today. Let me make some room here. And we'll stick our cornbread in there. And off we go. All right, so while we're doing that, I don't slice my apples until I have to. So you get to see my apple slicing demonstration. People do it in different ways. I tend to just cut my apples off of the core, and I'll snack on that later. And then I can just thinly slice them. If your knife is sharp, this should be pretty easy. If your knife is not sharp, you might have to turn your apple upside down. It's a little more safety oriented to do it right side up. This is a great sharp knife that I love. Remind me, my timer just went off, so I need to turn my jackfruit. All right. There. 2 more of those.
Colleen would like to know, Del, if the recipes you're doing today are in any of your books.
No, but I'm glad you asked, because these recipes, well, the cornbread is adapted from Better Than Vegan. The other recipes, I'm writing a new cookbook, and I have a writing partner, and we've come up with a tentative name. It's called the Soul Food is Whole Food Cookbook. And so my co-writer, Charm Ridley, is a dear friend, and she's known as Atlanta Creole, but she's a Southern girl. She's lived in Atlanta. She was born in Michigan, but grew up in Louisiana. And she cooks Creole, vegan, whole food, plant-based, oil-free Creole, and she's really good at it. So she's going to put about 25 recipes into the book, and I've got about 75 of some of my family favorites that are going to go into there. So we're both really excited about that. So stay tuned. We're self-publishing, and that's a whole new thing. But we're hoping it'll be out sometime this summer.
Fantastic.
Before the fall travel season. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Yeah, there's something about the self-publishing, the freedom of choosing the recipes that I want, and the things that I want to include in this cookbook that I get excited about. And you've self-published, and you know that.
Yep, absolutely. I think you'll do great. So Kathy says she loves you, Chef Del, but she has a nut allergy and a soy allergy. So can she use a different milk?
Oh yeah, use any milk that you want. You know, one of my favorites, and I didn't make it this morning, is oat milk. And I'll tell you why. Oat milk takes about 5 minutes to come together. So you take some ice cold water and your oats, 1 cup of oats, 4 cups of water, throw that in your blender. And you only want to blend it for about 20 seconds, because otherwise it gets kind of gummy. And you definitely want to use the ice cold water to avoid that gumminess too. And you're done. You can flavor that any way you want, but it's a good one. It's my favorite. We all have oats on hand, right? So it's a nice one. But I've done cashew milk, and of course that would work for your nut allergies, would it? But
Yep.
oat milk is one of my favorites.
Tracy says when she makes cornbread, it's either too dry or too wet. Any cornbread making advice for Tracy?
Yes, use this recipe.
Okay.
Baking for me is a formula, and it's a matter of figuring out that formula for these things. A couple of things can happen when your cornbread is too dry. It could be overbaked. It could not have, maybe it doesn't have enough liquid. It could be overbaked, or it could be too dry. Overbaking, like I said, when you do oil-free, you reduce your cooking time. So if you're converting a traditional recipe from one with oil to one without, cut back your cooking time and start looking for all of your baked goods. Start looking for the testing your product at the beginning of the cooking time. So if it says 17 to 20 minutes, check it after 15 minutes for doneness. All right, you'll be surprised, especially the cornbread. It does. It absorbs a lot of liquid and it gets done pretty quickly. All right, so that.
Del, people are asking, can you make it gluten-free?
Oh yeah, and you can use a gluten-free baking mix, which is my favorite choice. I use the Bob's Red Milk gluten-free baking mix. He has 2. There's an all-purpose baking mix, and then he has one that's an all-in-one baking mix. So the difference is you have to replace the gluten with something in a gluten-free baking mix, and you can buy guar gum or xanthan gum to add to it, or you can buy it already in it. And by the way, you can create your own baking mixes, but you'll find recipes all over the internet. I think the thing about it I like about Bob's is you have this blend. A flour is a combination of protein and fat and fiber and starch and all that. So finding the right blend is the key to making that come out right. Okay. But gluten-free, and then you would convert this recipe, by the way, with just 1 for 1. So whatever your gluten flour is, and either your xanthan gum if you're using that. And you only need a ½ teaspoon of xanthan gum, I think, per cup of flour. So that's an easy one. The other thing you're looking at me look over here for is my script. I get busy chit-chatting and I forget to do things when I'm cooking, and we got 4 recipes we want to get right. So I've got Chef AJ over in one corner, I've got my script over in the far corner, and it says to continue with the jackfruit. So we're heating up our pan for the jackfruit. Oil-free cooking, stainless steel pan, use whatever pan you like. I love stainless steel because I'm hard on pans and they're pretty forgiving. I like this one, so what we're going to do with this one, I've got a stainless steel handle, so I'm going to make my sauerkraut and my jackfruit and all of that in this pan and throw the whole thing in the oven instead of putting it together in another pan. And just don't forget to use a handle to get it out with when it comes out. All right, so we heat up our skillet. We're going to add our onion in there. And here's if you're new to oil-free sauteing, I have videos about it. You can Google Chef Del or Google Del Sroufe and you'll find them to show you how. All of my recipes are written to show you the technique of oil-free cooking. Hot skillet or a warm skillet. We start off with vegetables that are high in water content. So onions and carrots and celery and bell peppers, mushrooms, etc. Those do well in this high water content environment, right? And then your things like broccoli, which doesn't do so well, you cook them with high water content vegetables, or you steam them partially, increasing their water content, and then add them to your pan. But the goal is not to steam or to boil the vegetables, because that just dilutes the flavor. The dry cooking caramelizes the sugars and such in your vegetables, and that adds to our flavor. So we're trying to build flavor in our oil-free kitchen. We're just using different techniques than traditional kitchens would use, right? So you can see, by the way, for the first timers, the onions don't burn as soon as they hit the pan, right? They're good to go.
Hey, Del, Susanna wants to know if you could please share your ratio for oat milk, homemade oat milk.
I think it's 1 to 4. One cup of oats and 4 cups of oats or of milk or water.
And she wants to know if you soak your oats first.
No, I don't. That's the other thing I like about the oats. So you soak your cashews, you soak your almonds. You don't need to soak the oats, but you do want to use that ice cold water. You do only want to puree that for 20 seconds. And you can strain it or not strain it. I'm kind of lazy and I don't strain, and I like, I get the extra fiber and all that in mind. But you just stir it up before you use it or shake it up and you're good to go. Cool. But think about the cost savings, because a cup of oats is going to cost how much? 30 cents, right? We're going to get a quart of oat milk for less than 50 cents. Love that.
Yeah, that is pretty affordable.
It's pretty affordable, and we're using less packaging and all those things. I just bought 4 pounds of oats myself, and I'm ready to go because I'm trying to eat my oatmeal every day. I'm starting off my new year. I've had a really good year with weight loss. I lost 110, 115 pounds now since September of 2021.
You lost me. You lost me.
I lost you. I did. I lost an AJ, everybody.
Congratulations. I know it's not easy.
It's not easy, but I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about habits and support and community, and which is what I love about your community. They're supportive. The community that I've created at the T. Collin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies and CNS Kitchen, we've created a supportive community, and you have to have it, because for some people, and some of you out there know this, you're the only one in your family that's eating like this, right? And that makes it difficult because people are always trying to challenge your food choices. I'm very lucky. I've been around long enough and doing this long enough that my friends are supportive. My single member of the audience today is my next door neighbor and very good friend, and she's horribly supportive. She's always like, what will you eat? What do you want to eat? What do we do? And that's the kind of friend you want, right? I don't know why this thing is. The stove drives me nuts. I have 2 different kinds of stoves here. I have my butane, which I love, and then I have the electric, which sometimes I think is more fickle. And they both drive me nuts. So I'm going to move my pan over to the hotter, the butane stove is a little bit hotter, and then use this one for something else. At some point, that'll start doing its thing. Anyway, while it's doing its thing, we can start our black-eyed peas. Oh, yeah. my dear guest get bonus points and a treat for lunch because he just reminded me to turn the jackfruit. I had set a timer. I forgot about it. You can start to see there. Look how much meatier that looks already, right? And then we're just going to toss it up a little bit. I keep this dredge, by the way, that we're using for the jackfruit. I keep this on hand, and I use it to make oven fried tofu with. I use it to make all kinds of things. You can put any vegetable in there and bake it and have a kind of a fry or something if you want. So up to you. Can you hear the difference? How slow this stove was to heat and how quickly the other one did?
Yep.
So I'm going to start on my Hoppin John.
And Del, what machine do you use? Karen wants to know, to make your oat milk. Just your Vitamix blender?
I use my Vitamix, but you can use any blender. The Vitamix works great. I was slow, and you know this, AJ, that I was slow to jump on the Vitamix bandwagon, and glad that I finally did. But I used the cheapest of the cheapest I could find for years out of the thrift store for everything. But the Vitamix works great. All right, so we're starting our Hoppin John, and we're just going to start off with another saute. You know, two of those going at the same time. So we've got onions and celery in this pan. And then you can see over here, the pan starts browning. And that's when you just want to put a little bit of water in. All right? A couple of tablespoons. Perfect. Then I believe we're going to add our apples. We got caraway seeds already ground up. We've got our apples. We're going to get in there and let those tenderize some.
Have you ever tried my favorite apple called the Envy apple?
No, you've been hiding a secret from me. What is it?
Oh, they have them at Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and Costco. It's just a sweet apple. If you ever see ENVY, give it a try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I play true confessions time right now?
Wait,
You know,
what?
since
What?
in 2018, I sort of semi-retired. I came home, and it was probably one of the worst mistakes I ever made with my health. I came home and I didn't leave the house for a few years, and then the pandemic hit, and I didn't leave the house then. So I was in the hospital in 2021 because I'd been sitting for 3 years, but I was getting all my groceries delivered, and I still have not gone back into a grocery store.
Wow.
I may have to change that habit, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy not going into the grocery store. You should smell the caraway and the onions in the can right now.
I love caraway seeds. Caraway seeds are so good.
Oh my gosh, right? And it's not just for bread. I didn't like rye bread as a kid, but when I opened my bakery, I made this wonderful rye bread and fell in love with it. It wasn't a dark rye, it was a lighter rye, but I'm a fan now. And you'll see caraway, you know, in Northern European dishes a lot, but you will see it in some of the Mediterranean spices. So it's kind of a known, widely known spice. If you don't like caraway, you can leave it out, and you could use something else in here, maybe a little bit of thyme or something.
Del, have you ever used dill seed? Not dill weed, but dill seed.
Yeah, yeah. I don't cook as much of the Northern European style as I have. What do you cook with yours with dill seed?
Well, I don't cook with it. My friend Nan, who's going to be on the show on January 9th, has a ranch recipe, a ranch dressing that has it in it. It's very good. It's very similar to caraway seed in flavor.
I make a ranch and I use the fresh dill if I can get it. I keep trying to grow fresh dill in my garden and don't do very well with it, but I don't know why. It's a cool weather crop, probably. All right, so we've got 2 pans going on. We're cooking live, everybody. By the way, you see me, I have a specific cooking order. If getting in the kitchen stresses you out and you think you're spending too much time in the kitchen, I always recommend two things. I do a mise en place. AJ knows what this is, but I teach it in my classes. I get everything chopped up and measured. I wish I could turn my camera around and see it. I have everything measured and labeled and ready to go. And that takes me about 45 minutes of time. So that when I sit down to cook, two things. I don't have to worry about what I forgot to buy. Then I have everything ready to go, and it really reduces the cooking time. There's less waiting time in between while you're chopping and all this other stuff. So I love my mise en place for that reason. Look at that nice brown stove in there. More water. You can use vegetable broth here. I recommend a sodium-free vegetable broth because when you use vegetable broth for a saute like this, what happens is as the liquid evaporates, the salt concentrates, right? So make your own or use a low sodium version and you'll be much, much happier. All right, so that's jackfruit. I mean, that's when I'm sure the jackfruit. And then what we're going to do next, and let that cook for a little bit longer, is get our jackfruit out of the oven. And I might cheat. I could go two ways with this. I could either put my jackfruit in with the other, or the other in with the jackfruit. I think jackfruit in. So taste this. It's delicious.
Hey, Del, how are you good at like tasting something like at a restaurant and then making it yourself?
I've gotten better. You know, my sense of spices and flavoring food is it's evolved over the years because I cook kind of straightforward, simply. I don't have a lot of spices in one dish unless it's like a curry or North African or things like that. But I have learned to identify spices and flavors better. I used to argue with one of my bosses at a vegetarian restaurant I worked at who she had layers of flavor, 5 or 6, 7 different herbs and spices in a dish, and her food was great. And then she'd look at my recipes and she goes, that's all you're putting in there. And I'd be like, yeah, because that's what I wanted. So I'm getting better at it, but I wouldn't call myself a master. I think, you know, cooking is a learning process. It's a lifelong learning process, right? It just takes practice and repetition and exploration and being willing to do all those things.
The reason I ask is, Del, remember when I came a couple times to speak at the Wellness Forum? You guys would take me to a restaurant that had this fabulous beet burger.
Oh, North Star, yeah.
Can you make?
I have recreated my version of that, and I like it. You know, the one thing that I can't recreate with theirs is they do a plain broiled burger. But I've gotten one pretty close to theirs that I like a lot. All right, so here you can see that combination of yummy stuff going on in there. What I'm going to do is take our vegetable broth and pour that over that. And if you wanted more of a gravy, you can mix in some arrowroot with this, and that would be fine. And then we're going to pour our, now if you're doing this from a jar, remember a lot of your sauerkraut can have a lot of liquid in it. So drain that liquid off first. You don't want that to overpower your dish. And like I said, I suppose you could put some date paste over that. I used to sprinkle that with sugar, but we don't do that anymore. All right, and then this is going to go into the oven and cook until it's crispy, crusty, brownish, and off we go.
Maybe you'll do the beet burger one day on the show.
Huh?
I think people would love that.
I'll do a burger. I did a burger class this past summer. I did 3 different burgers. A Mediterranean chickpea burger, the smoky black bean burger with the beets. Mine had millet in it, which I loved.
I love millet. It's an underused grain, don't you think?
Not in my house.
Right. No, it's so good.
Millet is the thing. I use it a lot. I make everything from meatballs. As a matter of fact, one of my classes coming up, I make sausage out of it. And in the China Study Family Cookbook, you'll see my Mediterranean meatballs. I make that into Mediterranean melt. We're doing that class coming up in a sandwich class. I make meatballs. I make millet loaf, like a meatloaf. I made millet pilaf. There's a wonderful millet almond pilaf recipe. For years, not my recipe, but a wonderful one I used to make. So I think it's a very underused grain, very nutritious. It's been around forever, from all parts of Northern Africa to the Middle East and even into Western China. And we need to eat more millet. My older brother, coming into my bakery, I used to make a millet polenta sunflower bread. And he would come into the bakery and go, millet, that's bird food, as loud as he could. I'm like, whatever.
We'll get a t-shirt, eat more millet.
Right? Or millet is not just for birds.
Yeah. I love that. Not just for birds, but Jerry wants to know if you could please repeat which sauerkraut you used.
This is Cleveland brand. I don't know how far you'll find that across the country, but this is from Cleveland, Ohio, and I got it from Whole Foods.
Nice.
I don't know that if you'll see it more than regionally, because it has to be kept refrigerated. So I don't know how far it's distributed, but you could certainly contact Whole Foods and find out. But you'll find gourmet sauerkraut all over the country. It's made everywhere. I mean, you really can't just look for it. Or if you go to grocery store, if they have a German food section, look for the sauerkraut in there, because they don't use the same that's used over in the vegetable section. They really do use a really higher quality sauerkraut. Here's some thyme. This comes from my garden. I have a running joke I'm going to share, because my good friend who's sitting here with me in the audience, we share a garden, and she does most of the gardening and has for years and years. I'm just trying to step into doing more of my care. I gave myself a lot of credit for putting in a path in our garden this year, but I mostly just choose what we want to grow, and then she grows it and makes it all happen. She's got the green thumb. That's garlic. But she did harvest for me the thyme from the herb garden this year, so I used my own fresh thyme. Some green pepper we're going to throw in there. Right? That thyme, man, makes all the difference. There's nothing like fresh herbs or your own fresh dried herbs from your own garden, because they really, really are that much better. What am I missing with my Hoppin jar? Oh, that's about it. So, okay, here's the thing with our recipe. So, would you look in the freezer there and see there's another bag of the Hoppin jar of the black eyed peas? I ordered dried black eyed peas from Whole Foods, and they brought me frozen. And so the only reason this matters for this recipe is depending on what you can find. In other words, if you find dried, you're going to use 4 cups of vegetable broth. There you go. You're going to use 4 cups of vegetable broth. If you're using some like this, these came frozen, which means they're mostly cooked. So the beans have already absorbed some of that water. So you don't want to use a full 4 cups of water to start. Start off with a couple of cups and let it do its thing. I'm going to add a little extra to account for some of that water. And so start off with less and then add to it. So I'm going to add just a couple of cups of broth, and then we'll move this aside and let it cook, and we'll do our greens. Yay.
Hey, Del, I actually found a salt-free sauerkraut if somebody has to be strictly salt-free, a la Goldhammer. It's called Rejuvenative Foods. They do sell it online, and it's some Whole Foods. It's called, Rejuvenative Foods, raw sauerkraut, organic raw salt-free cabbage dill sauerkraut.
How they ferment that?
I don't know, but I know it's possible, because in the bundle that we did, we had a raw vegan sauerkraut that was salt-free. I don't know how they, I think you use celery juice. I think you juice celery, and that's salty enough.
No. See, there's always something new to learn. And I tell you what, I don't eat strictly salt-free, but I have been, I was on one blood pressure medication. I was on 2 blood pressure medications when I was sick last year. And then I decided I didn't like them at all and started losing weight and got off of one of them. So if you don't think that getting healthy, eating the diet doesn't make a difference, it does. I got off of one of them within a couple of months and have been working to get off of the second. And I don't think my blood pressure is close to normal, but I might be a little salt sensitive. Most people are. So I've been looking at ways to reduce the salt and sodium in my diet. And one of them is just eating more fresh fruits and vegetables in my diet and less, well, definitely less processed foods, less restaurant foods, because that's where all the salt really lives. But adding food to the salt to the end of your dish if you're going to use it at all. But getting to that point, AJ, I thought about it, of getting to that point where you are, where I stop eating salt altogether, and then your taste buds down regulate to the point where when you do taste salt, it's too salty. Right? So, it's kind of a decision that you have to make for yourself. So, and then by the way, for the frozen Hoppin John that we have here, we're a little bit more liquid to this. For the frozen Hoppin John we have here, supposedly 8 to 10 minutes of cooking is all that takes, which is crazy. But it's whatever you can find. All right, let's move on to our greens, and then we're cooking on fire. Start off again with our onions cooking in the pan. Man, I don't like that stove. It just doesn't get as hot as the others. So greens, and even in my family, there are the traditionalists, and then there are those who, like me, who like to explore. And I love, a good pot of greens like everybody. It's a wonderful dish to have in the house. And for years, I was just like collard greens, and so I either like collard greens by themselves, or I mix up collards and kale and mustard and those, kind of traditional. Or my writing partner, Charm, makes hers that has cabbage in it. And I don't know if hers had Brussels sprouts or not. But when I saw someone putting Brussels sprouts in there, my favorite vegetable, by the way, I was like, oh yeah, I'm all in for that. How can it taste bad, right? So excited about that possibility. And this is the first time I've made them that way. So you get to see the look on my face when I eat them. And how can it go wrong though, right? It's cabbage, it's kale, or oops, cornbread is not quite ready.
Hey, Del, Marianne wants to know, what's the difference between millet and brown rice? I mean, I know they're different grains, but I'm guessing she asked maybe in the taste or texture.
Well, the millet is a little round grain. And to be honest, I think brown rice tastes starchier. It might have more starch to it. The flavor, most of the grains are pretty mild in their flavor until it's what you cook them with that makes a difference. Millet cooks quicker. It's done in 15 to 20 minutes. You cook it the same way as you do brown rice, which is nice. But other than that, it's probably the nutrient makeup pretty similar, right? So when you're cooking grains for like a side dish, try millet sometimes. The only thing about millet, and here's what I like about it, but you have to be careful with it. When I used it to make meatloaf, I overcook the grain a little bit because it sort of holds together better. It'll bind with itself, and I don't need to add anything to do that. No egg replaced or anything like that. If you cook it just right, then you can eat it as a pilaf or just as a side grain, as a breakfast cereal, as it is in parts of the world, or whatever you like. But other than that, it's just a preference, and that they taste a little bit differently. But there's a texture is probably the biggest difference between the two.
Yeah, I find millet to be kind of a nutty flavor, and but it has a nice toothsome quality.
Well, see, I cook basmati brown rice is my favorite brown rice, and it too has a very nutty flavor. But you're right, the millet has more of that toothsome flavor to it than the brown rice does. I like them both. It's all about the mood or whatever I'm cooking. All right, so for our greens, again, we're letting our onions do their thing. we have, and I want to show you here with your Brussels sprouts. And you always want to cut off that little tip at the end. And then to help them cook quicker, we're just going to cut them in half. And that's all we did for those. If you're cheating, I don't like word cheating. If all you find is frozen Brussels sprouts, add them towards the end of the cooking. You don't need to cook them as long as you will the others, right? And then for our collard greens, of the greens like kale, mustard greens, such as the longer cooking of them, I took them off the stem. So I just fold, your collard greens have a stem right here. I fold them and I just pull them from that stem and then chop them up. Okay. Love, love, love my collard. And the cabbage we just chop up. Very exciting. I wish you were all here. I'd feed you lunch. But my audience of one and I are going to have a lovely lunch this afternoon.
Do you find, I'm curious about what you think about this, because I know you probably teach weight loss classes as well. I had a gentleman on yesterday named Billy, who's lost over 100 pounds now doing this diet. And he mentioned that, like, you know, he can eat potatoes and lose weight and not have cravings, but with rice, he sometimes gets a bit out of control.
You know, I think everybody is different. And I think you have to find what works for you. So, for example, I used to love as a kid, mom would make rice, almost like infant rice, putting rice with milk and sugar and cinnamon for breakfast. And I'd be hungry an hour later. But when I eat a big bowl of oatmeal, I'm usually full for a good three hours or so, right? So it's kind of what works for you, right? You know, I'm a big boy with a big appetite, and even to maintain my current size, it takes a lot of calories. So you have to eat to what works for you, but it just depends on the individual, I think.
Thank you.
Of course. So then we're going to add in. Now, this is kind of like garlic, of course. If you see me not use garlic in a recipe, you should ask me what's wrong. Smoked paprika. If you don't have smoked, you can use sweet paprika. And then stir that around with that cook for a minute and do its thing. And you'll smell that wonderful essence coming out of there pretty quickly. Smell it? I know, right? Let that cook for just a minute. I bet our Hoppin' John's going to be done quicker than anything. Yeah.
Hungry now.
You're hungry? You ready? All right. Then we're going to add in our vegetables. I can smell that smoked paprika now. My cabbage. I don't my cabbage. And for this one, you probably want to put a lid on this, which I forgot to do. Notice I haven't salted yet, salting at the end. Whenever you're cooking like a soup or something, especially if you're going to add salt, adding it towards the end, because when you add it towards the beginning and you evaporate some of that liquid, again, it concentrates all that salt. So you've got to be careful about that. And of course, I like black pepper. Everybody gets a little black pepper. And then I use liquid smoke, and that's kind of up to you whether or not you want to use it or not, just for that extra smokiness. Let me find the lid here. And we'll make that magic happen. All right, so we're in waiting mode, so let's talk. Couple of things. I've got some fun classes coming up in CNS Kitchen, and then I'm open to what you guys want to see here next month. I know AJ mentioned burgers. We want to do burgers as a winter class. I'm all open. You just vote, 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 vote. But I'm doing winter soups January 5th at noon, doing a tofu class January 12th. We've got a guest chef on the 18th, and we're doing hot sandwiches on the 25th. At the end of the month, I'm going to be doing a week-long batch cooking event. And what it is I'll send you a menu on Monday, and then we'll have a Q&A about it on Tuesday night to see what questions you might have about the menu, things like substitutions, ingredients, and all that. We'll give you some tools to help you get your kitchen ready for batch cooking. So how to do mise en place, practicing knife skills, organizing your kitchen and all that. Do your grocery shopping on Thursday. Friday, you do your mise en place. You get all your shopping and stuff done. And then Saturday, from 10 to 12, I think, we'll cook together live for 2 hours. So it's a fun way to sort of do a cook along, since we can't all be in the same room together, but a fun class, I hope. So that's what's happening with us. And what are we waiting on, AJ?
And Del, how do people get in touch with you for the classes? Is there a link to register? Because if you give it to me, I can put it in the show notes.
I think there's the show notes. I think I put in there CNS Kitchen.
Okay.
Link.
Perfect. And let's see, Rebecca says, would you consider miso this lesser of all evils for salting something? I will say that miso can vary widely in the amount of sodium. There's low sodium misos and there's high sodium misos.
Yeah, I've got miso here for my Hoppin, John, and so it's, you know, I think it's all about how much of it you use. I don't know that it's a better choice. I mean, miso is a nutritionally dense food, but you know, if you're already cooking a nutritionally dense meal, then it's just, you know, if you're sensitive to salt, miso is going to be just the same kind of sensitivity. Don't you think, AJ?
Yeah, I absolutely. But at least, you know, it has some health benefits and hopefully maybe they'll use less. There are some brands that are lower in sodium though. And there's things like coconut aminos, you know, that have much less sodium.
I haven't used coconut aminos. You like them?
No, I don't use, you know, listen, I'm not perfect with salt because I love condiments like salsa, and the salsas I like, I don't know how to make, like the ones that are pasilla and, you know, the authentic tomatilla. But I used to use it early on, but they actually have one at Trader Joe's now that's like a smoked, what's it called? Coconut aminos. It sounds intriguing. It's about 90 milligrams, you know, a tablespoon instead of 2,300. So it's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. You just, I mean, I think if you're starting off, look at getting rid of the processed food from your diet. It's you're moving away from foods that have no nutritional density to foods like fresh vegetables, beans and grains and fruits that have a higher nutritional density, are higher in fiber, and are naturally low in sodium. Right? 2, start cooking, adding the sodium towards the end. 3, learn to read labels. Right? Because you'll see how much sodium, for example, here in my 2 tablespoons of miso, I'm looking at 1 tablespoon of miso, 820 milligrams of sodium. Yeah. Right? Now, if that's the only salt I'm adding to my dish, maybe not too bad, but if you're sodium salt sensitive, then you have to watch out for that. But you need to read your labels and look and see. A lot of the foods like canned tomatoes can not only have salt added, but sugar added, and sometimes oil added. All of your condiments have it, and you know that, you know, you use small quantities of those, but you can find some with lower amounts of sodium added to them. But learning to read the labels will save you a lot. And I track my food content. One of the things I've done for weight loss, not so much because I'm a calorie counter, but because what I wanted to see was the difference in nutritional density in my foods. And I know what it is. It's just a mind game I play with myself. But when I'm eating on track, you'll see the sodium is lower, the fiber is higher. I'm getting 50 to 100 grams of fiber in a day. I'm getting all these vitamins and minerals that are listed, right? But if I'm eating a crappy day, if I had, you know, French fries was made up half of my calories for the day, I'm missing out on a lot of the nutrients, right? So paying attention to those things, you get used to, and you get used to the taste of stuff with less salt in it, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
All right, let me look back here one more time. I think we're good with my with my glasses.
That's a great idea to invite a studio audience, because now you have somebody to eat the food with you.
Well, it is, and you know me, I believe that one of the ways that we get healthy and part of the health project is community. We teach that in my group a lot because, like I said, there are a lot of people who do this alone, right? So I've invited friends especially after the pandemic was over. I started inviting friends that I hadn't seen. I had a former employee and a woman who used to volunteer in my cooking classes, Tom. The woman that I started the Central Ohio Vegan Society with in 1999 came over one day, and we had lunch afterward, which is nice. But it's nice to share to share a meal with others, and it makes me a healthier eater. And my friend sitting here looking at me certainly will let me know when I'm eating too fast or engaging in it, because that's one of the things I have to pay attention to. Is I've been a fast eater since I was a baby. They ate too fast. So off you go. All right, here's our cornbread, by the way. It is done, and you can tell the top of it, it shouldn't give in at all when you touch it on the top. You can put a toothpick in there and see that too, that if a toothpick comes out mostly clean, it's good to go. All right, that's our cornbread. Isn't it pretty?
Beautiful.
And then I'm going to let our other cook this a little bit more, but let's look at our. So for our Hoppin John, if you want this thicker, use less broth. I am going to add a little bit of miso, and you want to add that to a bowl with a little bit of your miso and some water, hot broth, and let it dissolve that way. We can stir it around in our heater, and then just let that cook. Make sure it dissolves. So if you don't want that one person to get the big bite of miso, and again, if these were dry beans, we'd probably have this covered, cooking for a good 50 to 60 minutes. If you have the AJ, did I tell you that I am a proud owner of an Instant Pot? Did I lose you?
Oh, sorry. I'm just looking. You're talking to me.
Did I tell you that I'm a proud owner of 2 Instant Pots?
So which size did you get, Del?
The bigger one and the smaller, I don't know. I got a big one. I got 2 sizes.
They actually have more. They have 3, 6, 8, and 10 now, believe it or not.
Okay, I have somewhere probably 8 and 6 or 8 and 3 or something like that. And I haven't used them a lot, but I love them for cooking beans and things like that, because it just takes all the time out of it. I also love them like I love my air fryer in the summer. I don't have an air conditioned house, and in the summer I don't have to heat up my whole kitchen. Right, when I have an air pot and the Instant Pot going, because it doesn't heat up the whole house. I love that. All right, I'm tasting black eyed peas now.
Do you ever buy black eyed peas in a can?
I do. I mean, if you live by yourself, I'm gonna tell you that sometimes it's just easier to open a can of beans than it is to cook for just one person, right? And I have to admit that there are days when I'm trying to eat healthy, when I just need something to take the edge off, I'll get a can of beans. just maybe a little salsa or whatever. But yeah, I don't buy black eyed peas because they're a quicker cooking bean. But buy them dry or buy them canned, however. Another use for black eyed peas that I love is I make hummus with it. Take your traditional hummus recipe, use black eyed peas instead of your garbanzo beans, so you get that. Black eyed peas have a distinctive flavor. They're mild flavor, but they have a distinctive flavor, and it makes a delicious hummus. Right. So if you know me and if you've been around my cookbook long enough, you know that I make like hummus with everything but.
You ever make cowboy caviar?
I do. One of my best friends from high school, and this is the support that I talk about. We went to high school together. I've known her 40 plus years. We have a regular event, international dinner club. And so we get together, we choose the theme, German, Moroccan, Indian, whatever, and then everybody brings a dish. And this group of friends always make sure that there's plenty of vegan options for me. Not one of them are vegan, but they always make vegan options for me. But Elizabeth, if she has a party and she knows how much I love it, will make me her Texas caviar. And she's using that delicious balsamic vinegar we talked about earlier. She makes that for me, and I'll sit and scoop that and be a very, very happy guy. I make oil-free tortillas, by the way. You can take your tortilla rounds, and then put them in your air fryer and use those. And so I have an oil-free happiness that I have. All right, Hoppin' John's going to sing. By the way, another way to thicken up your Hoppin' Johns, sometimes you'll see in Southern kitchens, they will cook the heck out of those beans so that the gravy is almost released from that. I don't cook mine as long, but if you want that thicker gravy, a couple things you can do: add in some instant mashed potato flakes or some mashed potatoes that you have left over and whisk those in, or you could puree some of the beans, right? Throw those into the food or the blender with some liquid and puree them. It'll give you a little bit of that creaminess that people seem to like. By the way, here's the thing about our parchment paper is our cornbread comes out easily like that. The magic elves that were here to do my dishes did not show up. And we're getting close to the thing. Look at that. Quickly, that starts to do its thing. That's going to be so good. In my family, we used to cook the heck out of the greens. They cooked the greens until there was almost no greens left.
I like them better when they're verdant, real bright.
I like the brightness, and I like them just tender, right? So I'm going to cook these until the Brussels sprouts are tender, and then I'm done. All right, and then I have one more thing to show you. So our Hoppin' John towards the end, and you can garnish with this. Oh, I forgot the time. I know it's busy something. Here's the time for my Hoppin' John. Adding it towards the end, that's okay. And then I serve it garnished with some green.
Oh, where'd you go, Del? You one of your cameras, the battery must be off. Uh-oh. Do you guys see that? It's like a TV thing. I don't know if he knows. I will text him. Oh, but he's using his phone probably. One of your cameras is off. I think it said battery low before it went off. Oh boy, and he doesn't have his volume. No, he's using a one camera system. Well, this is something. How do I get in touch with him? Guys, any suggestions? Maybe I'll call him. All right. This is real live TV. Thanks. Okay. He knows, guys. So I'll have to entertain you. So happy New Year, by the way. I'm wearing sparkly again, maybe tomorrow, and then I'm done with the New Year's. So until Del comes back, let's tell you the lineup for this week. If you're a subscriber, you already know it because we send the schedule out every Saturday with who's going to be on, because even though we're doing regular programming, there's also going to be bonus shows because there was too many people that I booked 6 months ago. So you'll be seeing a lot of shows. So if you are a subscriber, you'll know that in the email. And if you're not, you can always consider subscribing to this YouTube channel, which I greatly appreciate, maybe even giving it a thumbs up. And then you'll know. So we have tomorrow is the first Monday of the month. So we have Dr. John McDougall. He's going to be talking about dietary implications of diseases like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, for example. We're going to be having on Tuesday, Dr. Doug Lyle. The show is called Straight Talk with Dr. Doug Lyle. On Wednesday, we'll have another fabulous chef, and Kathy Hester. It's called Kathy's Vegan Kitchen. And it looks like Del's back. I'll read the rest later. Yay.
You know what? I charged my battery, so I don't know what happened. I'm very sad, but
yeah.
well.
You know, it's funny because before it did that, it did say battery is low, but I'm thinking, oh, we'll get through the show, but guess not.
This is why I missed my video person, but here we are anyway. So I'm going to show you this by hand, which is kind of fun, and I get to show you the kitchen, let you see my little kitchen setup here. So here is our pork and sauerkraut, or our jackfruit and sauerkraut. Doesn't that look delicious? And then over here, you can see these are our Hoppin John, which I yum. Our cornbread is right there. And then coming up here are my greens, right? Just letting this cook. I'll do a test run on a not quite there on the green. So my guest does not want to be on camera, but here's our little setup. I'm going to back up away from the away from the stand so you can see. Okay. So this is my kitchen. That's my backyard garden. There's the dishes I have to do after you're all gone. There's my studio setup, AJ. It's called OBS Studio. It's what allows me to stream 2 cameras live, and we can talk about it if you want. It takes a little bit of a learning curve. You can see my cameras and lighting all in my little kitchen.
That is pretty sweet.
Yeah. So this table gets moved over to the wall at the end of class. This little shelving unit folds up here, and we turn it back into a regular kitchen after the show.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that's about it. So I'm happy to take any questions. Anyone have? We've gone on quite a long time today, didn't we?
It's okay. We love you. Okay. Well, for example, Jessica says, I love Del. He's one of the most genuine people in the plant-based community. Yes, here's a question from Patricia. What type of green did you use?
We used collard greens and cabbage and Brussels sprouts.
Oh, Brussels sprouts are great. Stacy says,
my favorite vegetable. I can eat Brussels sprouts with some nutritional yeast and black pepper and be a happy guy.
You know, it's funny. I never liked them until I liked them, and now I love them, you know, and I even eat them plain steamed now. They're so good, you know. My husband hates them, and he hates when I cook them. He gets upset. He doesn't like the smell.
A lot of people, it's one of those vegetables you either love or you hate. When I was growing up, I loved vegetables as a kid, which is maybe why I'm still alive in spite of my diet. But we ate it all, you know.
Hey, Del, that could be the title of your next book. Brussels sprouts saved my life.
Right.
Yeah. So I asked people to
take.
Stacy wrote a nice comment about thankful for the show, and I appreciate that comment. You guys are typing questions for Dr. McDougall. He's tomorrow. You've got to send those in advance because we do them in the order received to help@chefaj.com. So you're going to be on again the first Sunday, which I believe is February 5th. So it's not Super Bowl Sunday. So if people haven't commented what they'd like you to see, we can think maybe Super Bowl, we can think Valentine's Day, because those will be coming up after your appearance.
I tell you what, let's do a Super Bowl themed thing. We'll make some taquitos. We'll make my smoky black bean burgers, and I'll find a few other fun appetizers for party foods. Because I love the appetizers. That's my favorite food.
I know, because you get to eat them with your hands usually.
They make me very happy.
Well, Del, you did a fantastic job kicking off the 4th season of Chef AJ Live with the new formatting. I look forward to spending this time with you every month and maybe get even a larger live studio audience, you know?
Yeah, I'm excited. So thank you, everybody, for joining in. This is fun.
And congratulations on your 115-pound weight loss. That's
thank you. Stay tuned. We're going to do a report every month. So I'm going to let you guys in on my progress. I think that public accountability is part of the picture.
Well, I don't care how you look, but I like how that you seem to feel better. And I feel like the old Del is coming back.
I do feel better. Thank you. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. Thank you. And Happy New Year to you and yours. And Happy New Year to all of you. And I'm so blessed that you watch the show live. And if you watch the replays, we also thank you. Please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell if you can. And come back tomorrow an hour earlier, because there are 2 doctors that we have to give an extra hour to. One is Dr. Peter Rogers, who has a regular show now. But tomorrow is the first Monday of the month with the McDougalls. And he's going to be talking about diseases that you either have or have friends that have, and I know you want answers. Bye, Del. It's so great to see you.
You too.